Professor Virelon closed his crystalline eyes at the front of the domed classroom, his neural interface gently syncing with the mounted hollow core suspended just above his head. The solid light projector hummed as it powered on, anticipating the opening lecture of this year's most infamous course, Death Worlds, a survival overview. And at the top of the list, always, was the same planet, Torvin, a blue and green nightmare world officially classified as a Category X hazard sphere by the Galactic Concord. The lecture hall curved around him in two perfect crescents, like a twin-bladed fan aimed at his position. Students of every known form filled the rising tiers. Some shimmered with bioluminescent tendrils, others sported rigid chitin plating or thick fur lined with survival oils. A few struggled to maintain coherence, their gelatinous bodies stabilized only by continuous psychic discipline. Virelon stood, atop a circular dais of scorched gray stone, the kind used in conquered shrines and ancient academies. Time had worn grooves into its surface, patterns etched by long-forgotten instructors before him. But even in this crowd of galactic elite, one figure stood out. Zarlek, of the Shardari species. A being not of flesh or scale, but of fused microcrystals. His exoform was a living lattice, gleaming with ever-shifting hues. Blues melted into iridescent greens, pulsing golds, and the occasional violet blaze. His body refracted light in endless waves, like a living prism. Yet despite the shimmering armor, Zarlek's eyes were utterly black voids, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. A smooth face framed them, with two long sensory fronds arching backward like antennae, twitching at the slightest movement or sound in the room. Without a word, Professor Virelon activated the projector. The lights dimmed, and space above him erupted into a glowing sphere. A planetary rendering appeared, rotating slowly. Torvin, in brutal detail. Cerulean oceans wrapped around dense green masses, and central bands of rust-red deserts cut across continents. White cloud spirals drifted lazily above the terrain. The projection was so detailed, students could identify clustered lights of arcologies and settlements on the night side, flickering against a planet that, by all data, should have killed its inhabitants long ago. Virelon's gaze swept over the room, not focused on one, but on all. His voice was calm, yet weighty. Today begins our comprehensive study on lethal worlds. We open with the most hostile inhabited planet on record, Torvin, home to millions, and still actively trying to end them. The sphere shifted. It zoomed toward a single landmass on the southern hemisphere, an isolated titan of a continent, alone in an oceanic expanse. We begin with Varaka, known locally as a place of iron skies and burning ground. The display filled with a vast expanse of crimson terrain, broken only by thin coastal green. Virelon gestured, and the image zoomed further. Varaka is divided into death zones. The inner sector, the Scorchlands, experiences environmental swings that would kill most species in less than a single axial cycle. Surface temperatures surpass 50 degrees C during sunfall and plummet below freezing by nightfall. The soil becomes molten, the winds flash freeze you. And that's just the climate. Images began flashing above him, the predators of Varaka, each more grotesque than the last. A segmented serpent, its fangs dripping neurotoxin potent enough to kill an entire shuttle crew. A burrow beast with leg-thick spines and reflexes that outpaced laser tracking. Venomous stalker with translucent limbs that wrapped around prey in silence. And then, worse, came the microscopic threats. Hollow images zoomed in, parasites that entered through skin pores, insects that bred inside organs, spores that hijacked brain functions, and worst of all, the aerovirus clouds, invisible deadly storms that drifted across coastlines and dissolved lungs in minutes. Virelon spoke with a quiet, dreadful reverence. This continent was the final, one settled by the native species, the humans of Torvin. Only a life form honed in earlier hellscapes like Dracaris Prime, which we'll study next, could survive here. In fact, the Concord has considered banning all civilian travel to Torvin on Varaka's risk alone. A scoffing voice interrupted from the fourth tier. A female Relon, her deep red fur peppered with obsidian spots, leaned forward, her triangular ears flicked with disbelief. I'm Thera, from Relax 9. Our world's a Class 4 death world. We have acid hurricanes and razor-leaf jungles. But what you're describing, no one in their right mind would choose to live on Varaka. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. A translucent polari undulated in agreement. A plated chitter crustacean clacked its jaws in mild alarm. Others voiced the same doubt. Why would anyone live there? Virelon opened his mouth to respond, but a low sound cut across the lecture hall. At first, a tremor, then a rumble, then, unmistakable, laughter. Not the clicking of arthropods, not the harmonic trill of song-kin. This was deep, resonant, unsettling. Every head turned toward its source, a biped, short fur only atop its skull, bronze-tinted skin, omnivorous teeth, revealed now in a wide, unrepentant grin. "Sorry, mate," the human said, voice casual. "Couldn't help meself. Name's Kale, and funnily enough, I'm from Varaka." Thera's ears snapped upright, twin antennas suddenly alert. Her spotted fur rippled as her muscles tensed in instinctive alarm. The human's teeth gleamed again, those carnivore-designed tools of tearing and grinding. Professor Virelon stood frozen on the central platform, his shimmering crystal matrix flickering in rapid-fire hues, a visible sign of a Shardari in deep confusion. A human in his classroom? How had no alert been sent? But before he could regain control, Thera leapt from her seat. Her chair screeched across the floor with a grating protest. She pointed a trembling claw at Kale. "I don't even know you," she shrieked, her voice rising into a panicked pitch. "We are not from the same species. We are not bonded. There is absolutely no mating happening between us." Her fur stood on end, making her appear twice her size. "I don't even know what humans do when they mate, but we are not doing it." The room fell into a vacuum of silence. The gelatinous student behind Thera partially collapsed, momentarily resembling a spilled drink before reforming. Even the rigid insectoids twitched their antennae in what could only be described as bewildered discomfort. Professor Virelon's ears rotated in opposite directions, a visual glitch of complete disbelief. His mouth opened, then closed. Then again. "Miss Thera, I don't believe anyone implied—" "No worries." Kyle cut in smoothly, running a hand through his short scalp fur, his bronze face now tinged pink. A possible emotional signal, though several students assumed it was a threat display. "Cultural confusion, that's all. Where I come from, mate just means friend, pal, buddy, someone you'd split a brew with." He shrugged, casually deflecting the intensity of every gaze locked on him. Compound, reflective, or glowing. Translator Core must be stuck on Central Terran dialect, probably trying to run it through Lexan English or some such garbage. Never works. Those Terrans barely speak proper language anyway. He flashed that unsettling grin again. "But yeah, everyone's a mate. Barista, mate, random lift mate. Guy who steps on your foot at the market, mate. Enemy, also mate, just different tone." Thera slowly collapsed back into her seat, her fur lowering in reluctant understanding. "So, you weren't suggesting reproductive bonding?" "No offense," Kyle said with a chuckle, "but I prefer partners with a bit less fur and way fewer retractable claws. You seem cool, but I'm not into folks who could gut me mid-conversation." Professor Virelon cleared his throat. Sound like clinking glass. "Yes, well, perhaps we can refocus. His implants pulsed. The projection above shifted from Varaka's death zones to the student enrollment list. After a moment, a single profile highlighted Kyle Drennan. Species, human. Origin, Torvin. Sector, Solari Minor. Classification, pending. There it was, a footnote buried in bureaucratic mishandling. The system had failed to recognize Torvin as a danger zone and filed the human under a general world placeholder, a near-catastrophic oversight. Virelon's ears lowered, his species' form of apology. "Mr. Drennan, you are indeed enrolled. My deepest regrets for the administrative lapse." "No stress, Prof," Kyle said, stretching casually. "Happens." Virelon tilted his head. "And you truly lived within the Varakan territory?" "Born and raised," Kale replied proudly. "Little coastal zone called Karos Bay. Schooled in the capital, Delbris. Did my planetary aptitude trials in the southern flats. Even did a gap cycle working at a solar farm deep in the Ashwind expanse before applying here." The reaction was instantaneous. At the rear, a trio of Zarnan, lizard-like beings with sun-absorbing scales, fixed their slitted eyes on Kale with a predatory intensity laced with unease. Their postures stiffened, micro-tremors betraying their fear. In the middle tiers, the translucent Vairith students began migrating, one by one, shifting their liquid-light bodies away from Kale's seat with deceptive casualness. They're bioluminescent. Inner organs flickered alarm signals. Their heart clusters pulsed erratically. But the greatest surprise came from Thera. Maybe it was shared experience as fellow Deathworlders. Or maybe it was curiosity finally overcoming instinct. She turned, studying him with a wary but intrigued stare. "Is it really like that?" she asked softly. "All that death? The danger? Is it truly as the professor described?" Kale scratched. His head, a movement that triggered several students to note it as a probable emotional gesture in their xenobehavioral logs. "Not as bad as he's making it out," he said. "Sure, we've got some wild critters, yeah, but it's just normal life, you know? We check our boots before wearing them, swim in flagged zones, don't walk through tall grass, avoid, venom beasts in the stinger season. You get used to it." Professor Virelon's ears twitched, a sign of processing overload. A field trip to a death world would require immense approvals. Risk waivers, neuroinsurance. I'll need to call the dean. A student in the front row, Biren, a Vairith known for both excellence and anxiety, stood abruptly. His entire digestive system had ceased function in fear, clearly visible through his transparent midsection. "Section 34.7 of Concord Academic Law," Biren gasped. "No student may be compelled to visit a Class X death world. I invoke my protection rights. My origin cluster would dephase themselves if they knew I was even considering—" "Agreed," hissed a chorus of voices. The Zarnan barked their approval. Insectoids clattered mandibles in unison. Several students accessed their interfaces, clearly ready to submit formal objections. Virelon turned back to Kyle, his colors stabilizing into a smug blue-gray. "You see? They won't even visit your world." Kyle chuckled. "No worries. We don't have to go there physically." He leaned forward, eyes bright. "Torvin's surface is fully mapped. Our version of virtual immersion is flawless, uses the same sensory interface the Concord uses. But we've had it longer, higher fidelity, better latency." The professor's colors blinked rapidly in surprise. "Impossible. Virtual tech is heavily regulated. Such systems require Federation-level clearance." Kyle's tone shifted, just slightly. A sharper edge under the grin. "We invented it, centuries ago. Started with goggles, upgraded to neural docks. We've got full-body realism at 8K sensory resolution. Most of it's used for, well, games." He looked around the classroom. "We build fantasy realms, simulate wars, tame galaxies, All for fun, so yeah. I can pull up a real-time Torvin replica right now. He pulled out a flat rectangular device, seemingly primitive but lit up at his touch. Who wants to see it for themselves? Above the classroom, the projector flickered. An invitation bloomed in bright, playful text. Welcome to Virtua Torvin. Kale Drennan invites you to explore coastal Karos. The words shimmered gently above their heads. Students looked at one another, uncertain. They had asked for proof, and now they were about to get it, whether they truly wanted it or not. No one moved at first. The floating invite above the class blinked innocently, like it was offering access to a relaxing field trip, not a guided tour through a world infamous for its survival statistics. Kyle casually tapped his screen again. No pressure. You can stay behind and read reports. Or, he tilted his head. See it for yourself. Smell the ozone, hear the ash winds, feel the heat roll through your bones. Professor Viralon stepped forward, his crystalline body glowing with measured concern. What safety protocols are in place? What levels of sensory override are involved? Full immersion risks are regulated for a reason. Kyle smirked. Nothing permanent. Your body stays here chillin'. Just your senses get synced. Smells, sounds, sights, touch, tuned to safe thresholds. He looked around. You can always log out, but it won't be easy. A pause. Then Thera stood up, slowly, like she couldn't quite believe herself. If a human can survive there, she muttered, I can handle a projection of it. She walked down to the front. Kyle gave her a nod. No smugness this time, just respect. A second later, a Varith shimmered down in fluid form, then re-solidified beside her. I will try as well, it said. Data must be verified, emotionally, experientially. More followed. The insectoid students clacked uncertainly, but joined the growing group. Even Byron, the panicked one from earlier, floated down, translucent nerves flickering. Kyle smiled. All right, let's load it up. He tapped the device again. The overhead projector flickered, then exploded with light. The classroom vanished. In its place, a white sand beach under a golden sky. Crimson-tinged waves crashed against sharp stone arches. Massive trees with braided black trunks swayed gently in wind that carried hints of copper and salt. Bird things shrieked in the distance. Feathered, scaled hybrids that flapped awkwardly between cliffside nests. Something vast moved beneath the ocean's surface, its shadow sending ripples through the water. Welcome, Kyle said, arms outstretched, to Karos Bay. The class stood stunned. Their senses told them this was real. Their feet felt heat from the sun-baked sand. Their lungs pulled in rich, ozone-heavy air. Some students swore they could feel humidity building on their skin equivalents. This isn't a recording, Virelon whispered, his tones shaken. This is active environmental rendering. Kale nodded. Real-time physics, simulated flora-fauna systems, even ambient danger AI, though I've toned that down so nobody dies 5 minutes in. As if in reply, a soft chirp sounded from the jungle behind them. Several students spun, tense. A creature stepped out, six-legged, thick-skinned, with glinting orange eyes and skin like volcanic stone. It sniffed once, looked at them, and turned away. Kale walked forward, not even flinching. That's a Grelic. Scary-looking, yeah, but harmless unless you smell like unwashed berries. Weird thing, I know. Local fruit reacts with their hunger instinct. He kicked a stone casually, sending it clinking down a slope. Fun fact, our ancestors wiped out their apex predators about 300 cycles ago, left the middle predators to fight each other and evolve sideways. Now we've got creatures that can't be killed easily, but mostly don't care unless you bother them. Thera crouched by the water, tail twitching. This is beautiful, she admitted. This isn't what I expected. Kyle crouched beside her. That's the part nobody tells you. Torvin's hell, yeah. But it's ours. And it fights back, sure. But sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it lets you breathe. A shrill shriek broke the calm. A sleek, winged predator, narrow as a dart, dived from the cliffs. Its talons extended, eyes locked on one of the Vayreth. The gelatinous student panicked and dove behind a rock. The creature pulled up last second and soared into the clouds. Kale didn't move. That's the sky rake, big show-off, doesn't actually attack unless it hears crying sounds, and even then just a warning swipe. But hey, you scream, you get the lesson. Professor Viralon finally stepped into the simulation, his form shimmering as he adjusted to the interface. This system is light years ahead of Concord virtual tech. This should not exist. Kale turned to him, arms crossed. We had to adapt. We couldn't leave our planet, remember? No easy space routes, no fancy terraforming. So we made our own versions of escape, built entire universes inside code. He pointed toward the horizon, where lightning flickered across distant mountains. Out there's the ash-wind expanse, toxic winds, glass dunes, and crawl beasts that burrow through carbon rock. Want to go? Thera stood beside him now, her eyes narrowed. This is insane, but I want to see it. More nods followed. Kyle grinned wider this time. Good, because that's where things start getting real. He turned to the group. You came here to learn about survival. Well now, let's see how long you'd last in our shoes. And with a wave of his hand, the simulation expanded, the sky darkened, and the hunt began. Lightning crackled across the horizon. The golden skies dimmed to a stormy bronze. Sand from the simulated dunes began to swirl as wind pressure rose. The ash-wind expanse wasn't just a name, it was a warning. Welcome to Level 2, Kyle said, voice raised over the growing roar. Now the training wheels are off. Professor Viralon's crystal form glowed with alarm. Mr. Drennan, this is beyond a teaching simulation. You've escalated the intensity settings without a full consent loop. Relax, Professor, Kale replied calmly. System won't allow physical or psychological damage beyond acceptable Concord training limits. Think of it as a practical exam, with weather. The students weren't so calm. The ground beneath them began to tremble. Something large was moving beneath the surface, disturbing the simulated bedrock. A ripple passed under their feet. What was that? One of the insectoid students buzzed, wings twitching in panic. Kale smiled without humor. We call it a burrow maw. They hunt sound, feel movement, size of a house. Don't worry, though. This one's just curious. Just curious? Thera snapped, claws partially extended. That thing could swallow us whole. Then don't scream, Kyle said, walking backward toward the dune ridge. Follow me, quietly. The group hesitated, then followed. They climbed the ridge. A strange calm overtook the simulation. But the tension hung heavy. Every shift of sand, every insect chirp felt amplified. At the top, Kale knelt and pointed beyond the ridge. Down there's an old solar farm, abandoned during the flare season. You'll see glass shards from the windstorms. No cover, no shadows. He turned, face hard now. You'll have 3 minutes to cross it. Something will follow. Don't stop, don't speak. Don't hesitate. Or you die. Virelon stepped forward, voice sharp. This is not an ethical learning structure. You're inducing trauma under the guise of education. No, Kyle said evenly. I'm teaching them something Concord textbook covers. How to think when every instinct screams. How to breathe when death is watching. How to survive when the rules no longer apply. He looked over the class. Every species here sees humans as unpredictable, dangerous, unstable. But what they never understand is how we got that way. Then he stepped off the ridge and ran. The students hesitated for only a heartbeat, then followed. The cracked glass under their feet reflected fractured versions of themselves. Every footfall echoed. Thera's tail twitched with tension. One of the vireth began to flicker from stress. Behind them, the sand moved again. Faster, bigger. Then the first shriek came. A student slipped, sliced open by glass, and let out a cry. Immediately the sand erupted. A massive armored serpent shot from the ground, teeth like obsidian blades. It didn't bite. It listened. And then it followed. "Keep moving!" Kyle shouted. "No sounds, no sudden changes!" Thera grabbed the fallen student, a young winged Kaskari, and pulled her up. Together they sprinted across the final stretch, skidding down the far slope just as the sand creature stopped at the edge and vanished beneath the surface. Silence. Everyone collapsed at the base. The simulation held steady. Storm above, sand. Behind, breathing heavy, Kyle turned, his face no longer held any trace of humor. "This is what you call a death world. But for us, it's just Tuesday." He looked straight at Virellon. "Your academic models treat danger like an anomaly. But for us, danger is the baseline. Comfort is the exception. Fear is just background." "Noise!" Virellon's voice was tight. "You've endangered students." "No," Kale interrupted. "I reminded them of what the real universe is like. Unfiltered, unfair, and unwilling to care about species ratings or test scores." Then Kale pulled up a new projection from his device. It displayed archive footage, not simulation, not fiction, real recordings. Human colonists under fire, emergency responders pulling injured from volcanic collapses, children in radiation suits helping elders through ruins. "You wanted to know how we survive?" Kale asked softly. "Because we have to. Every day, on worlds that don't love us, under skies that don't protect us, in cities that burn, flood, freeze, and still we stay. We build. And when the galaxy said we were too unstable to join your Concord," he turned off the projection. "We didn't argue. We adapted. We built better tech. We trained harder. We turned every nightmare into a training drill. And now we're here, in your universities, in your fleets, on your councils. Not because you accepted us, but because we stopped needing your permission." The class sat in stunned silence. Even Virellon had no reply. "Simulation off," Kyle finally said. The world dissolved. The classroom returned. The students looked around, at the walls, the seats, the safe structure of the academy, and it all suddenly felt smaller. The atmosphere in the auditorium was heavy, like the gravity had subtly increased. Screens flickered with stills from the simulation, students fleeing glass storms, the burrow maw's fanged silhouette, Kale's stone-faced expression as chaos, unfolded. The Central Ethics Council of the Academy and 6 beings from different species hovered behind a transparent podium. At the center, High Evaluator Tren Vox, a serpentine intellect with flowing sensory ribbons, coiled slowly, eyes unreadable. "Cadet Kyle Drennan," Tren's voice echoed, enhanced and emotionless. "You are summoned to account for unsanctioned, pedagogical tactics and potential neural trauma inflicted on Concord citizen students." Kyle stood alone on the projection disc, hands behind his back. "Understood, Evaluator." Virellon stood to the side, arms folded. His crystalline glow had dimmed to a stormy violet, restrained outrage. The student hijacked school systems to create a real-time survival stress test. No preparation, no safety reinforcement. He risked the minds of dozens, and for what? Shock value? "To teach," Kale said simply. A ripple went through the chamber. Tren's ribbons stirred. "Elaborate." Kale didn't flinch. "You've taught your students how to solve equations, how to quote treaties, how to navigate hyperlanes. I taught them how to act when everything they know collapses. Because collapse isn't theory to my people. It's memory. The council remained still. Kale stepped forward, voice steady. You say fear is dangerous, that it breaks order, that it clouds reason. You're right. But we learned to train fear, to ride it, to sharpen it into instinct. Fear is why our engineers designed breathable shelters during active meteor storms. Fear is why our children run drills before they can read. Why we monitor tectonic shifts by scent, by bird calls, by the sound of wind. His gaze swept the council. You think my simulation was a threat? It was generous, because reality doesn't ask your permission. He tapped a control on his wrist. Another projection activated. This one showed a conquered outpost on Veltrian 7. Chaos, fires, a planetary quake, communications down, civilians scrambling. 3 weeks ago, Veltrian 7 suffered a rogue tectonic pulse. The base AI failed. Communications blacked out. Protocols broke down. The Concord task team froze. Couldn't process. Couldn't move. Another image appeared. Kyle, boots scorched, dragging 2 injured diplomats through rubble. My people didn't wait. We responded. Why? Because where we come from, hesitation is death. Trenvox shifted at last, silk-like voice quieter. And you believe this justifies traumatizing your classmates? Kale exhaled. They weren't traumatized. They were woken up. Ask Thera if she regrets entering the storm. All eyes turned toward the feline alien. She stood slowly in the gallery. Her voice was quiet but firm. I was scared, but I learned more in that hour than in a cycle of lectures. Kyle didn't endanger us. He respected us enough to show us something real, others murmured. A few students rose in support. Even Virelon's posture shifted, uncertain now. Fear, Kale said, looking back at the council, isn't the enemy. It's the training partner you never outgrow. We don't ignore it. We hone it. Because one day, when the safety nets fail and your equations mean nothing, the only thing between you and death is instinct. Ours is sharp. Is yours? A pause. Then, Tren's voice. Deliberations will commence. Your simulation protocols remain suspended pending review. Until then, you are confined to academic grounds. Dismissed. Kyle nodded once and stepped down. But as he passed, the students in the crowd, the ones who had run through the glass fields, who had seen the simulated storm, they didn't look at him with fear. They looked with respect. 2 days passed. The simulation deck was sealed. Kyle was grounded. No tech access, no field privileges, just endless holo lectures and silent stares from staff. But word had spread. Students whispered in corridors. Not in fear. In fascination. Replays of KL's unauthorized trial leaked from implants. Not everyone approved, but no one ignored it. Then the first copycat attempt happened. A group of third-cycle trainees tried to run a micro-sim based on Kale's Desert Storm. It malfunctioned. 2 minor injuries. The council tightened restrictions, but curiosity only grew. Virelon stormed into Kale's study cell. Do you understand what you've started? The board wants to monitor every sim from now on. Kale looked up from a static projection of Earth's old survival training manuals, now relabeled as historical artifacts from Solon Prime. Good, let them watch. Virelon pulsed with frustration. You treat trauma as a badge. What happens when someone breaks from fear? Kale stood slowly. They already are breaking, but no one's preparing them for it. His tone sharpened. We don't simulate winning. We simulate failing, again and again, until we know how to stand back up without thinking. That's how you train survival. That night, something changed. Alarms screamed across the dorm levels. A real one this time. Emergency lighting pulsed red. Holo notifications flooded neural implants. Biocontainment breach, upper sector. Full lockdown in effect. Shelter protocols active. Remain calm. Students stumbled awake in confusion. A rogue spore bloom from the biological lab had escaped, mutating faster than predicted. Ventilation systems glitched. The toxin was airborne, non-lethal but hallucinogenic. Several students were already experiencing motor disruption and panic loops. Virelon rushed to the command desk. How did this happen? The response from security AI was delayed and garbled. Containment fields failing. Simulation mainframe is being hijacked by unknown override code. Override code? Kale stepped into the control room, despite being banned. It's not a full override. It's a redundancy circuit. He walked up to the command matrix and slid his personal device onto the panel. A surge of data unlocked a second interface. I designed this last year. You thought it was a game mod. It's not. It's a survival protocol emulator. Virelon's glow flashed between fear and fury. You've been building shadow systems? Kale didn't answer. He patched into the sim layer and began reshaping the emergency feed. Listen, you can't stop the spore with sealants. It's already in the air. But we can guide students through it. Not by calming them, by training them, in real time. Virelon hesitated. You're proposing we turn a containment breach into a simulation drill? Kale nodded once. Exactly. He broadcast, his voice across the academy. This is Kale Drennan. You've been exposed to an atmospheric neuroagent. It induces disorientation, panic, and sensory distortion. Do not trust your instincts. Train them. This is your simulation now. Keep moving. Pair up. Breathe slow. Listen to your pulse, not your thoughts. Fear is fire. Control the burn. Some students began to stabilize. They followed Kale's voice. Breathing patterns synced. Coordination returned. Injuries dropped. Collapse was prevented. Virelon watched in stunned silence. Kale stood in the storm again. But this time, it was real. And he was the only one not afraid. Hours later, containment was restored. The breach sealed. No casualties. The board convened again. This time there was no trial. Just a decision. The council hall was quiet. No storm simulations, no holograms, just silence and decision. Kale stood once again on the central platform. This time, not as a student, not as a threat, as something else. High Evaluator Tren Vox began the proceedings. His ribboned body slowly coiling and uncoiling, voice subdued. Kale Drennan, your actions have violated procedural law and training protocol. You introduced unauthorized systems into our infrastructure. And yet, your intervention during the biocontainment breach prevented loss of life and systemic failure. He paused. We are no longer here to judge your rule-breaking. We are here to judge what you represent. Across the room, the gallery was packed. Not just students, instructors, officers, even Concord delegates from off-world bases. They had all watched the simulations, all read the reports, all seen the difference. Virelon stepped forward. His glow was steady now, focused. The academy exists to prepare minds, to cultivate intelligence, order, calm under pressure. But pressure is theory here. It's neatly categorized, wrapped in safety, filtered through 1,000 cautionary layers. He looked at Kale. You brought chaos into the structure. But it wasn't reckless. It was real. A murmur swept the room. Tren gestured toward Kale. And what do you say for yourself now, cadet? Kyle looked out over the council, the gallery, the eyes fixed on him. You created a perfect system where no one has to face true danger until it's too late. But danger doesn't wait for schedules. It crashes through the roof, floods the valley, rips the ground open beneath your feet. And when it does, no formula, no treaty, no AI will save you. He held up his implant controller. Only the training you own, the scars you've earned, the fear you've tamed. A projection flared behind him. Real disasters, archived conquered footage, failing outposts, fractured teams. And in everyone, something familiar. Hesitation, collapse, confusion. Then a second reel, old human footage. Earthquakes, fires, floods, war zones. But this time, order forming from chaos. Humans dragging others to safety. Improvised. Triage. Drills in motion before orders were given. Kyle spoke again. We don't survive because we're stronger. We survive because we assume everything will go wrong. And we train anyway. He looked at the council. You asked me why we simulate failure. Because when the real thing comes, failure doesn't care if you were top of your class. Silence again. Then a new voice. It came from the back of the room, a scout officer, just returned from Deep Space Patrol. I have a report, he said, from Sector Real 9. He walked forward and placed a recorder on the table. A station on the edge of conquered space was attacked, not by raiders, not by pirates. Something new, something fast, AI reactive. Our protocols failed, he paused. But the only survivors were a team trained in Kale Drennan's methods. Gasps, shocked glances, Tren Vox's ribbons rippled. He looked down for a moment, then back at Kale. You will not be expelled. Your methods will be evaluated, documented, and adopted. Effective immediately, the Concord survival curriculum will integrate Terran conditioning protocols. Kale didn't smile. He just nodded. Later, as he walked through the academy, courtyard students moved aside, not in fear, in recognition. Thera approached him, now wearing a trainee instructor badge. They're calling it the Drennan Directive, she said. Kale shook his head. Doesn't matter what they call it. He looked out at the distant sky. What matters is that next time something comes for us, we'll be ready.